Greetings! I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this plastic 28mm scale A15 Crusader tank by Rubicon Models. I was really quite excited about the release of this tank, and after some delays I finally got my hands on it. Hooray! The back of the box has a bunch of information about these tanks and their roles during the war. It also tells us that this kit can be used to make 6 versions of the Crusader, these being Mark 1 and 2, a close support version of both of those, Mark 3, and an anti-air version. That's a lot of variants. There's also a few pictures of different Crusaders, suggested paint colours, and an image of the included decal sheet. Inside the box is the always excellent instruction leaflet. I really enjoy the consistency of these. They're always clear and easy to follow. Just as the box promises, we have this decal sheet. They look quite good and there's a large variety of markings included, which is always nice. And of course, these 3 individually packaged sprues. Let's have a quick look at those sprues. All of the parts are neatly moulded and for the most part have very limited mould lines. Sprue A has most of the hull parts. Sprue B has turret parts and the rest of the hull, including 2 sets of side skirts. Sprue C has more turrets and another set of side skirts. Let's build this. As per the instructions, I start by building the track sets. I really like these. They're the most detailed tracks I've seen on a Rubicon kit so far. Very nice. There is a little bit of a mould line, but that's easily fixed by scraping it off with a knife. You can see there is a kind of keying on the wheels and sprocket to guide positioning. For the road wheels, this isn't really a big deal. You just need to have them facing the right way, and then the parts can be glued in. They fit very well. The keying does work a bit better for the drive sprocket. The teeth should engage with the tracks, and the wheels shouldn't protrude too far beyond the edge of the tracks. Next, I attach the idler wheel, and then I glue the hull sides to the tracks. These are quite simple to put together, and I think they look really good. The track sets can then be glued to the hull sides. Fortunately, the keying for these is effective and makes this step very easy. I then glue the whole top onto the lower half. I did have an issue with this. The hull part didn't seem to want to properly join and I had to hold the part tightly in place for a while the glue set. Not really a huge issue, just a minor annoyance. Once that was done, I moved on to adding the hull details. I glued on the lower front plate. There was a small gap here, but I fixed that by pushing the part up so the gap is on the bottom of the tank. The front of the driver's compartment can then be glued into place. Be sure to slot it into the recess properly. Then I added this armour plate. Make sure you place it up the right way. The bevel goes towards the top. Then I glue on the spare track links. This kit has a very interesting little feature for the lamp guards. It comes with a small part for bending wire into the shape for the guards. Unfortunately, I found this to be very fiddly and frustrating. I think the main problem was the wire I was using was too thick and hard to bend. I did get it roughly into the right shape, but I wasn't satisfied and so I decided to settle for the plastic parts instead. It would be cool if a little bit of wire of appropriate size were included. The plastic lamp guards might not be as fine, but the parts are decent enough. The lamp with the shade goes on the left. They more or less just slot into place. Moving to the back of the hull, I attach these exhaust things, or at least I assume they're exhaust things. I then glue on the lower rear part of the hull. There was an unfortunate though tiny gap between the drive casing and the upper hull. Next comes this vent part. I then assemble the external fuel tank. This is of course an optional part, but I like the way they look. It's made up of 4 pieces. Be sure to get the end parts on straight. There is no keying to guide this. Then simply glue it to the vented part of the rear hull. Unfortunately, there isn't anything to guide this either, and so it was a little bit tricky to position. Then of course, we can't forget the towing hook thing. How else are we going to tow things? It should be positioned like this, with that protrusion facing upwards. So far, all of these details are common to all variants of this tank. Since I've decided to build my Crusader as a Mark III variant, I glue on this hatch instead of the small machine gun turret that can occupy that space on the Mark I or II hull. Next, I glue on the side skirts. Be sure that you choose the correct ones for the version of the tank that you want. Mark I and II skirts look very similar to the Mark III. I did have a small issue with these in that they tended to want to curve away from the hull. I had to hold them quite firmly in place until the glue set in order to not have large gaps. Onto the turret. Something I quite like about this kit is that there are labels moulded into some of the parts to let you know which version of the tank they are used to make. I'm building a Mark III, and the turret part itself lets me know that I have the right parts. That's pretty cool. I glue both turret halves together. Next comes the very rear of the turret roof, and then both turret hatches can be glued into place. These can be modelled open, but there is no crew included to have poking out, nor is there any interior detail, so I glued them shut. Then I slot in this searchlight. Be sure to choose the correct part for this, there are a number of lamps on the sprues. Let's fill that gaping hole in the front of the turret with a nice gun. I've chosen to use the Mark V 6-pounder instead of the Mark III. The gun part itself didn't need much cleaning up. There are mold lines, but you'd have to hunt for them. As I usually do, I drill out an opening in the end of the gun barrel and widen it with my knife. Next, I glue the gun mantlet into the front of the turret. The machine gun should be on the tank's left. This part sticking out from the top can help with mantlet positioning. It goes on the tank's upper right. Then, I glue the gun into place. The end of the gun is shaped such that you can only really put it in one way. This is kind of helpful, though for this gun it wouldn't really matter how it was oriented. Then, the turret front can simply be glued into place. Finally, this stowage box can be glued onto the rear of the turret. If Rubicon had included a second one of these, the kit could make turrets for both the Mark 1 and 2 version and the Mark 3 version. I am a little bit disappointed that they overlooked that. Not to worry though, we can build the anti-air turret. Start by gluing in this internal floor part. It's key to ensure correct placement. Then glue the two halves of the gun assembly together. I'm a numpty, so I accidentally clipped off the short protrusion on the non-gun part. I glued it back on, but it does look a bit odd. Then I glue the gun into position, though strictly speaking you don't have to glue any of the guns in this kit. They can be left to freely elevate and depress. I do prefer gluing them into place though. The upper and lower turret halves are then glued together. And then the front plate is glued into place. A searchlight is then glued right here. And then I glued in this targeting apparatus. At least that's what I think it is. One final detail I added to the tank was this spare wheel. I wasn't entirely sure where it should be positioned, but I decided to put it on the engine deck. The side skirts I used are incorrect for the anti-air version of the Crusader, but that doesn't bother me too much, and it shouldn't matter if I decide to use it in a game. I mainly bought this kit to make the regular gun tank anyway, though the options are always appreciated. Let's compare this with another Crusader. This one is the resin and metal version from Warlord Games, which I assembled a while ago. I'll link the video here. I think the details look much more crisp on the Rubicon version. The headlamps look much better, even without the more realistic bent wire option. Obviously, they're both different versions of the Crusader, but I think it's still a fair comparison. The external fuel tank on the Rubicon version looks much neater, and it isn't lopsided, though that's more my fault than anything. Also, the Warlord version lacks the towing hitch. You can see here that Rubicon's fuel tank is much better detailed than the metal one. Looking at the back of the turret, we can see that Warlord's Crusader doesn't have a shovel. Everybody wants a shovel. The plastic one is simply much neater looking. Looking down on them, we can see that the dimensions are pretty close and shouldn't really cause anyone any issues, except rivet counters, but oh well. Overall, I'm really quite pleased with how this model has turned out. There were a few frustrations and imperfections, though they really haven't taken from my enjoyment of this build, nor the appearance of the tank. As usual, Rubicon's instructions are easy to follow and the minimal mold lines make for quick assembly unhampered by excess scraping and cleaning. I was able to put this Crusader together in a little over an hour, bearing in mind that I'm easily distracted. I'm not quite sure how I want to paint this Crusader, though it will most likely be a desert sandy colour, like the picture on the front of the box. That will be something new for me. I will of course share that process with you, so stay tuned. I hope this video has been interesting or helpful for you. What do you think of this tank? I'd love to hear comments below. And of course don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see more. Also, follow me on social media things listed in the description. Thanks for watching. Farewell.